The loneliest people are usually the ones everyone envies. Rain hammered against the glass towers of Midtown Manhattan as camera flashes exploded across the entrance of the Blackstone Imperial Hotel. Black SUVs lined the curb like polished shadows while reporters shouted questions no one truly cared about. Billionaire Ethan Blackwell stepped out of the back of a silver Rolls-Royce wearing a charcoal Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than most people's rent for 6 months. Beside him, Vanessa Hart smiled perfectly for the cameras, one hand resting lightly on Ethan's arm like she had practiced the gesture 1,000 times before. Maybe she had. The crowd loved her. America's favorite supermodel. Golden hair, diamond earrings, a face that belonged on giant billboards above Times Square. Ethan barely looked at the cameras anymore. After years of interviews, charity galas, and magazine covers, applause had started sounding like static. "Ethan, look over here," someone shouted. Vanessa turned immediately, flawless and glowing beneath the rain-speckled lights. Ethan turned too, but his eyes stopped somewhere else entirely. Near the back entrance of the hotel, half hidden beneath the red glow of a service sign, a waitress knelt alone in the rain collecting broken pieces of a champagne glass from the pavement. The wind pushed strands of blonde hair across her face as she carefully swept the shards into a small black towel before another employee could step on them. No one noticed her. Not the photographers. Not the guests rushing toward the ballroom. Not even the doorman standing 5 feet away. But Ethan noticed the way she moved. Calm. Precise. Quiet. Like someone used to cleaning up messes no one else wanted to touch. Vanessa tightened her grip on Ethan's arm. "Smile, baby," she whispered through perfect white teeth. "They're waiting." Ethan looked back toward the cameras for exactly 2 seconds before his attention drifted again. The waitress had finished gathering the broken glass. One tiny piece remained near the curb. A valet almost stepped on it. Without hesitation, she reached forward and picked it up barehanded before he noticed. The valet never even thanked her. She simply stood, brushed rainwater from her black sleeves, and disappeared through the service entrance carrying an empty tray and a bucket of melting ice. Ethan frowned slightly. "You okay?" Vanessa asked, still smiling for photographers while speaking through the corner of her mouth. "Fine." But he wasn't listening anymore. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers scattered gold light across hundreds of wealthy guests pretending to enjoy each other's company. Expensive laughter echoed beneath classical piano music, while servers carried trays of champagne through the sea of tailored tuxedos and glittering gowns. Everything looked beautiful. Everything felt hollow. Ethan shook hands automatically. Investors, politicians, actors, people who always wanted something. More money, more attention, more access. Across the room, he spotted the waitress again. She moved silently between tables refilling water glasses while guests talked over her like she was invisible. Yet somehow she carried herself with more dignity than anyone else in the ballroom. Ethan watched her pause beside an elderly woman struggling with her purse near the staircase. No cameras captured it. No audience applauded. The waitress simply bent down, helped the woman gather her belongings, then continued working without waiting for recognition. "Earth to Ethan." Vanessa laughed lightly, touching his chest. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" Looking bored around billionaires. She smiled, but there was tension underneath it now. Ethan glanced toward the waitress one last time just as she disappeared through the kitchen doors. Strange, he thought. For the first time all night, someone in this room had looked real. The ballroom grew louder as the night went on. Laughter bounced off marble walls. Champagne glasses clinked beneath golden chandeliers. Somewhere near the stage, a jazz trio played soft piano over conversations worth millions of dollars. But Ethan Blackwell felt strangely detached from all of it, like he was watching someone else's life unfold from behind thick glass. "Senator Reynolds is waiting to speak with you," his assistant murmured quietly beside him. Ethan nodded without listening. Across the room, the waitress moved through the crowd again, carrying a silver tray balanced carefully against one shoulder. Black uniform, simple pearl earrings. No dramatic makeup, no attempt to stand out. And somehow she stood out more than anyone in the room. "You are distracted tonight," Vanessa said lightly as she adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist. "That is unlike you." Ethan finally looked at her. Vanessa looked exactly the way magazine covers promised she would. Elegant, impossibly polished. perfect under every light. But perfection had started exhausting him. It always felt rehearsed. Long week, he answered. Vanessa studied him for a second before smiling again for another approaching photographer. She knew how to switch expressions instantly. Public warmth. Private calculation. The photographer snapped several pictures while Ethan barely noticed the flashes anymore. Nearby, a server accidentally bumped into a guest carrying red wine. A dark stain splashed across the sleeve of a gray cashmere jacket worth more than most people's monthly mortgage payment. The guest exploded immediately. "Are you serious?" The man barked loudly. Conversations nearby quieted. The young waiter froze in panic. Probably 20 years old at most. "I am so sorry, sir." Sorry does not fix Italian wool. The man's voice rose higher now. People pretended not to stare while absolutely staring. Ethan sighed softly. He had seen this scene too many times. Wealth turning minor inconveniences into public theater. Before security or management could step in, the blonde waitress appeared beside the table carrying a clean linen cloth and sparkling water. Calm, unhurried. "Sir," she said gently, "if you blot it immediately, the stain will not set." The man turned his irritation toward her. "Do you people understand how much this jacket costs?" She met his anger without flinching. "Probably more than my car," she admitted quietly. A few nearby guests laughed awkwardly, but she continued before the man could respond. "That is exactly why you should not rub the fabric." Silence. The man hesitated. Something about her composure interrupted his performance. Without another word, she handed him the cloth and crouched to help clean the spilled wine from the floor before anyone slipped. The young waiter whispered a grateful thank you. She simply nodded once and moved on. Ethan watched the entire exchange without blinking. Vanessa leaned closer. She should not have spoken to him like that. Like what? Ethan asked. Honestly, Vanessa shrugged. There is a certain way staff should behave at events like this. Ethan looked at her carefully then. Really looked at her. And what way is that? Vanessa sensed the shift immediately. "Do not do this tonight," she said softly, still smiling for nearby guests. "Do what?" "That thing where you suddenly become philosophical because someone working a catering shift looked sad in good lighting." Ethan almost laughed, but he did not. Because the strange part was Claire had not looked sad at all. She looked steady, like someone who had already survived worse things than embarrassment. A few minutes later, Ethan stepped away from another exhausting conversation about stock acquisitions and glanced toward the service hallway. The waitress was there again, stacking empty champagne flutes onto a rolling cart. For the first time all evening, he noticed her name tag. Claire Donovan. One of the hotel managers snapped impatiently at a dishwasher nearby, blaming him for delayed service. Claire quietly stepped between them before the young employee could answer. "It was my mistake," she said. The dishwasher looked confused. The manager exhaled sharply and walked away muttering under his breath. Claire immediately handed the dishwasher half of her untouched turkey sandwich from a small paper bag. "Eat before you pass out," she whispered. Ethan stood frozen near the hallway entrance. She had protected someone she did not even know. No audience. No reward. No cameras. Just instinct. Claire finally noticed him standing there. For a brief second, their eyes met beneath the cold fluorescent lights of the service corridor. No nervousness. No flirtation. No recognition of his money or status. Just quiet eye contact that somehow felt more honest than every conversation he had endured that night. Then, she looked away first, picked up the heavy tray cart, and disappeared into the kitchen. By 11:30, the ballroom had started thinning out. Investors drifted toward private lounges upstairs. Politicians disappeared behind velvet curtains with donors and cameras. The music softened. The laughter became slower now, heavier with expensive whiskey and exhaustion. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, rain slid down Manhattan in silver streams. Ethan loosened his tie for the first time all night. "You cannot seriously be thinking about leaving already," Vanessa said, adjusting her reflection in the back of a silver serving spoon. "The mayor has not even arrived yet. I have another meeting at 8 tomorrow morning. You own the company. Reschedule it." Ethan gave a tired smile that never reached his eyes. Vanessa studied him carefully. She was beautiful, but beauty had become part of her strategy now. Every gesture measured. Every laugh controlled. Every conversation angled toward influence, invitations, visibility. Ethan suddenly realized he could not remember the last time she asked him how he actually felt. A waiter passed carrying espresso shots on a tray. Ethan reached for one automatically, then paused when he noticed Claire near the far side of the room, helping an older pianist adjust sheet music beside the grand piano. The elderly man struggled slightly with trembling hands. Claire leaned down patiently, organizing the pages without rushing him once. "You missed a section marker here," she said softly. The pianist blinked in surprise. "You read music?" "A little." "A little," the old man laughed quietly. "You corrected Rachmaninoff fingering notes in under 3 seconds." Claire smiled faintly. Force of habit. Ethan slowed his steps without realizing it. Vanessa noticed immediately. "Again," she whispered sharply. Ethan ignored the comment. Claire handed the pianist his glasses after cleaning them carefully with a linen napkin. The old man looked relieved. "Thank you, sweetheart." "Of course." Simple words. Simple moment. Yet Ethan felt something uncomfortable twist quietly in his chest. Because kindness that expected nothing in return had become unfamiliar to him. Near midnight, the gala coordinator announced a surprise charity auction to close the evening. Guests gathered near the stage while photographers repositioned themselves beneath bright lights. Vanessa instantly transformed again. Posture perfect. Smile effortless. She thrived in rooms like this. Ethan stood beside her mechanically while another billionaire gave a speech about generosity that sounded suspiciously like a tax strategy. The auction began. Luxury watches. Rare paintings. A vacation villa in St. Barth's. Numbers climbed into the millions while applause echoed through the ballroom after every winning bid. Ethan barely listened. His attention drifted again toward the service hallway where Claire sat briefly alone on a metal folding chair beside the kitchen doors. She held a paper cup of coffee with both hands, staring quietly at the floor while steam curled against fluorescent light. For the first time that night, she looked tired. Truly tired. The kind that reached the bones. One of the younger servers approached her nervously. Ethan recognized him as the waiter from earlier who spilled the wine. "Thank you for before," the young man said softly. "I almost lost this job." Claire shook her head. "No, you almost had a bad night. That is different. Why did you cover for me?" She shrugged lightly. "Because everybody drops something eventually." The young server laughed quietly before returning to the ballroom. Claire finally lifted the coffee cup toward her lips, but before she could drink, another manager appeared beside her carrying a clipboard. "Claire, table 16 says their steak is cold. I will fix it. And the Henderson party needs another champagne tower setup." "Okay. And after that we need help downstairs moving inventory." Claire nodded once, stood immediately, and threw away her untouched coffee. Ethan stared at the trash bin longer than he should have. Something about that untouched cup bothered him. Vanessa stepped beside him suddenly. "You know what this looks like, right?" Ethan glanced at her. "What?" "You staring at the waitress all night." Her smile remained frozen for nearby guests, but her eyes sharpened. "I am observing people." "No," Vanessa replied softly. "You are romanticizing struggle again." Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" Vanessa crossed her arms lightly. "Men like you love the idea of simple women because you think they are untouched by ambition." Ethan looked back toward the hallway. Claire was already carrying heavy inventory boxes toward the freight elevator with another employee. "Maybe ambition just looks different on some people," he answered quietly. Vanessa laughed once beneath her breath. "Not kindly. Trust me. Every woman wants something." Ethan did not answer. Because for the first time in years, he had met someone who genuinely seemed to want nothing from him at all. And somehow that unsettled him more than greed ever had. The auction finally ended a little after midnight. Guests filtered toward the exits beneath a blur of expensive perfume, silk coats, and forced laughter. Outside, the rain had slowed into a cold mist that wrapped Manhattan in silver fog. Ethan stood near the ballroom windows watching taillights disappear down Park Avenue, while hotel staff quietly dismantled the illusion of luxury piece by piece. Flowers removed. Tables folded. Champagne towers drained and carried away like abandoned movie props after the audience leaves. Vanessa scrolled through photos on her phone beside him. "This one is good," she said, turning the screen toward him. "The lighting makes us look incredible." Ethan glanced at the picture for half a second. "Perfect smiles. Perfect couple. Perfect lie. You should post it before the blogs start uploading their own angles," Vanessa added. Ethan loosened his cuffs slowly. "You can post whatever you want." Her expression tightened slightly. "You are impossible tonight." Before Ethan could answer, one of the hotel coordinators rushed toward them looking pale. "Mr. Blackwell, I am so sorry to bother you." Ethan turned. "What happened?" "There is a problem with the donor piano downstairs." Ethan frowned slightly. Earlier that evening, one anonymous guest had donated a rare 1947 Steinway grand piano for the hospital charity foundation. It was supposed to be transported privately the next morning. "What kind of problem?" "The movers accidentally damaged one of the internal pedals while relocating it to storage." The coordinator looked nervous enough to faint. "The restoration specialist cannot arrive until tomorrow afternoon." Vanessa sighed dramatically. Can rich people survive one evening without inventing emergencies? Ethan ignored her. "How bad is it?" "The pianist for tomorrow's breakfast fundraiser is already threatening to cancel." Ethan rubbed his forehead tiredly. "Fine. Call another musician." "It is not that simple," the coordinator whispered. "The donor specifically requested classical repertoire only. The event starts at 8. A voice quietly interrupted behind them. "The left sostenuto pedal is sticking because the spring probably shifted during transport." Everyone turned. Claire stood near the service hallway holding a stack of folded black tablecloths against one hip. Ethan blinked. "Excuse me." Claire hesitated like she regretted speaking already. "Steinways from the 1940s have a softer spring mechanism. If it sticks after movement, usually the bracket shifts slightly." Silence. The coordinator stared at her. Vanessa actually laughed softly. "What are the odds the waitress is suddenly a piano technician too?" Claire remained calm. "I grew up around one." Ethan studied her carefully. "Can you fix it?" "Probably." Vanessa crossed her arms. "This is ridiculous." But Ethan had already noticed something different in Claire's face now. Not insecurity. Familiarity. Like she was finally standing near something that belonged to her world instead of theirs. 20 minutes later, Ethan followed the coordinator downstairs toward the private storage ballroom beneath the hotel, while Vanessa reluctantly trailed behind in expensive heels that clicked sharply against marble floors. Claire walked several steps ahead, carrying a small maintenance flashlight another employee handed her. The storage room smelled faintly of polished wood and dust. In the center of the room sat the massive black Steinway beneath soft overhead lights. Claire approached it slowly. Her entire posture changed. Softer somehow. Almost careful enough to feel sacred. Ethan noticed the way her fingertips brushed lightly against the piano lid before she crouched beside the pedals. "Can I borrow a screwdriver?" she asked quietly. A maintenance worker handed her one immediately. Vanessa leaned toward Ethan and whispered, "You cannot seriously trust this." Ethan never looked away from Claire. "I trust people who do not announce how impressive they are every 5 minutes." Vanessa fell silent. Claire adjusted something carefully beneath the pedal assembly while the room remained completely still except for distant hotel elevators humming somewhere upstairs. After a moment, she pressed the pedal once, then twice. A soft metallic click echoed gently. She stood slowly. "Try it now." The coordinator hurried toward the piano bench and pressed the keys nervously. The note rang perfectly through the empty ballroom. Everyone froze. "How did you do that?" the coordinator breathed. Claire shrugged lightly. "Old pianos speak if you listen carefully enough." Ethan stared at her like he had forgotten how to blink. The maintenance worker laughed softly. "That sounded poetic." Claire gave the faintest smile. "My father used to restore concert pianos in Brooklyn." Ethan stepped closer before he realized he was moving. "You play too, do not you?" For the first time all night, something vulnerable flickered briefly across Claire's face. Small, fast, almost hidden. "Not anymore," she answered quietly. Then she handed back the screwdriver, picked up the folded tablecloths again, and walked toward the service elevator before anyone could stop her. Ethan watched the elevator doors close behind her. Somewhere deep in the empty ballroom, one untouched piano note still echoed softly through the silence. The freight elevator doors closed behind Claire with a soft metallic hum, leaving Ethan alone in the underground ballroom beside the silent Steinway. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Even Vanessa seemed briefly unsettled now. The coordinator finally exhaled. "Well, that was unexpected." Ethan kept staring at the elevator long after the numbers above it stopped moving. Unexpected. That word followed Claire everywhere. A waitress who understood. Classical mechanics inside a 70-year-old piano. A woman who moved through luxury spaces without being impressed by them. Someone who looked tired but never bitter. Ethan had spent his entire adult life around people desperate to prove their value. Claire seemed to spend hers hiding it. Vanessa slipped her coat over one shoulder impatiently. Can we go now? Ethan blinked slowly. You go ahead. Her expression hardened immediately. Excuse me. I need some air. At 1 in the morning, Ethan loosened his collar slightly. I said you can go ahead. Vanessa stared at him for a long moment beneath the cold ballroom lights. You know what your problem is? She asked quietly. Ethan said nothing. You confuse mystery with depth. She walked toward the elevator before he could answer. The doors closed. Silence returned instantly. Ethan remained beside the piano another minute before sitting carefully on the black leather bench. His fingers brushed one key absent-mindedly. A soft note echoed through the empty room. Clean. Beautiful. Lonely somehow. He imagined Claire playing here years ago, before life pulled her somewhere else. Before uniforms and service hallways and untouched cups of cold coffee. Upstairs, hotel staff cleaned the remains of the gala while rain tapped softly against Manhattan windows. Ethan eventually made his way toward the employee corridor near the kitchen. He did not know exactly why, only that going home suddenly felt impossible. The service hallway was quieter now. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead while exhausted workers rolled carts of dishes toward industrial sinks. Ethan spotted Claire near the staff lockers changing the batteries inside a flickering flashlight. She looked up briefly when she noticed him. No surprise crossed her face. The piano survived, she said calmly. Ethan leaned lightly against the wall beside the vending machines. Apparently because of you. Claire shrugged once. It just needed a small adjustment. Most people would have announced they knew how to fix it the second they walked into the room. Most people like attention more than I do. Ethan almost smiled. You really do not care who I am, do you? Claire slid the flashlight back into a drawer. Should I? The question landed harder than he expected. Not rude. Not mocking. Honest. Ethan folded his arms slowly. Most people usually recognize me. I recognized you. And Claire closed the locker gently. And you are rich. Ethan let out a quiet laugh beneath his breath. That is all. Is there supposed to be more? For the first time in years, Ethan did not have an answer ready. Claire grabbed her worn gray coat from a hanger and slipped it on over her uniform. The sleeves were slightly frayed near the wrists. Ethan noticed anyway. He noticed everything about her now. Why did you stop playing? He asked softly. Claire paused. Only for a second. Life got expensive. Ethan studied her face carefully. That sounds like a practiced answer. It is. Silence stretched between them while distant kitchen noises echoed faintly through the corridor. Finally, Ethan asked, Did you love it? Claire looked down briefly while buttoning her coat. More than anything. Something inside those 4 words felt dangerously honest. Ethan glanced toward the rain-streaked window at the end of the hallway. Then why walk away? Claire gave the faintest smile, but it carried sadness now. Sometimes survival sounds louder than dreams. The hallway fell quiet again. Somewhere nearby, an industrial dishwasher hissed steam into the air. Ethan suddenly realized he had not thought about stock markets, shareholders, or acquisitions for almost an hour. That never happened. Claire reached for her bag. You should probably get home, Mr. Blackwell. Ethan. Okay. She adjusted the strap on her shoulder. You should probably get home, Ethan. He noticed then that she still never sounded impressed saying his name. Just human. Normal. Real. Do you always work this late? He asked. Most nights. And after that? Claire hesitated near the hallway exit. After that I usually take the subway to Brooklyn and sleep 4 hours before doing it again. Ethan frowned slightly. That sounds miserable. Claire looked at him carefully then. Only to people who have forgotten what real work feels like. The words should have offended him. Instead they stayed with him like a mirror he did not want to look away from. Claire pushed open the service door, and cold rain air drifted into the hallway instantly. Before stepping outside, she glanced back once. Good night, Ethan. Then she disappeared into the wet Manhattan darkness, while Ethan stood motionless beneath fluorescent lights, realizing he could still hear her voice long after the door closed. Ethan did not sleep that night. His penthouse overlooking Central Park felt unusually silent after the noise of the gala. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the empty glow of Manhattan, while untouched bourbon sat melting beside stacks of financial reports he no longer cared to read. At 3:15 in the morning, he found himself standing alone in the kitchen replaying one sentence over and over in his head. Sometimes survival sounds louder than dreams. Most people spoke to Ethan carefully. Employees filtered their honesty. Investors agreed with him before he even finished talking. Women admired the empire before the man. But Claire spoke like someone with nothing to gain and nothing to prove. That unsettled him in ways billion-dollar negotiations never had. By 7:30, Manhattan was already alive again. Horns echoed through wet streets. Steam curled from subway grates beneath the cold morning air. Ethan arrived at the Blackstone Imperial Hotel for the breakfast fundraiser wearing yesterday's exhaustion beneath a navy wool coat. His assistant looked confused. "You came back." Ethan kept walking toward the ballroom. Apparently, inside, wealthy donors gathered around linen-covered tables while reporters prepared cameras near the stage. The restored Steinway sat beneath warm lighting at the center of the room. Ethan scanned the crowd instinctively. No Claire. He should not have cared. Yet disappointment arrived immediately anyway. Vanessa entered 10 minutes later wearing cream-colored designer cashmere and sunglasses large enough to hide irritation. "You disappeared last night," she said quietly after approaching him. "I went home. Without me." Ethan glanced toward the piano again. "You seemed busy." Vanessa folded her arms. "You embarrassed me." "How?" "By acting like I was invisible the entire evening." Ethan finally looked at her directly. The strange part was she was right. He had barely noticed her once Claire entered the picture. Not because Claire was louder. Because she was quieter. Vanessa lowered her sunglasses slightly. "You know everybody noticed, right?" "Noticed what?" "The way you kept staring at the waitress." Ethan exhaled slowly. "You are making this dramatic." Vanessa laughed once under her breath. "No, I am making it honest." Before Ethan could answer, applause suddenly erupted near the stage. A famous concert pianist stepped toward the Steinway while cameras flashed rapidly across the ballroom. The fundraiser performance was beginning. Ethan watched automatically as the pianist sat down and pressed the first few keys. Then paused. Something was wrong. The melody stopped abruptly. The pianist frowned and adjusted the bench. Another attempt. Another pause. Quiet murmurs spread through the ballroom. The coordinator from last night rushed nervously toward the stage. "What happened?" Ethan asked. "The upper register sounds uneven now." The coordinator whispered frantically. "It was fine during testing 30 minutes ago." The pianist stood impatiently. "This instrument needs recalibration." Donors shifted awkwardly in their seats while reporters lifted cameras higher, sensing public embarrassment. Ethan rubbed his forehead tiredly. "Can someone fix it quickly?" "Not before the performance." Then a familiar voice quietly interrupted from behind the stage curtains. The humidity changed overnight. Ethan turned instantly. Claire stepped into the ballroom, still wearing her black service uniform beneath a long gray coat. Damp strands of blonde hair framed her face like she had rushed straight from the subway. She carried 2 paper coffee cups in one hand and looked mildly annoyed at the chaos unfolding around her. "Old Steinways react badly to sudden moisture shifts," she continued calmly, "especially after transport." The concert pianist blinked at her. "You know piano acoustics?" Claire handed 1 coffee cup to the exhausted coordinator. "Enough." Ethan watched her walk toward the piano with steady confidence while an entire ballroom full of wealthy strangers stared in confusion. Claire pressed several keys gently, listened, adjusted one tuning lever inside the panel near the strings. Then she sat quietly at the bench for half a second longer than necessary. Ethan noticed her fingers trembling slightly above the keys. Not fear. Memory. "Try now," she said softly while standing. The pianist sat down again and played the opening passage once more. This time the notes floated cleanly through the ballroom like warm light after rain. Conversation stopped instantly. Even the reporters lowered their cameras for a moment. Beautiful music filled the room. Claire stepped away from the stage immediately before applause could reach her. Ethan followed her without thinking. He caught up near the service corridor beside the ballroom kitchen. "You came back early," he said. Claire held her coffee cup close against the morning cold. "Double shift." Ethan stared at her carefully. "You could probably run this hotel better than half the executives here." Claire smiled faintly. "That sounds expensive." Ethan laughed quietly before he could stop himself. Real laughter this time. Claire looked slightly surprised by it. "There it is," she said softly. "What?" "The version of you that does not sound like a press release." Ethan fell silent. Because somehow the waitress from Brooklyn had already started noticing the difference between who he was and who the world expected him to be. The fundraiser ended just after 10 in the morning, but Ethan stayed longer than necessary. Investors approached him with contracts. Reporters requested interviews. Board members discussed expansion plans over imported coffee and polished smiles. Normally, he moved through conversations like a machine built for efficiency. Today, his attention kept drifting toward the service corridor, where Claire disappeared every few minutes carrying trays or paperwork or boxes no one else wanted to move. "Mr. Blackwell," his assistant repeated carefully. Ethan blinked. "Sorry. What?" "The Chicago acquisition call starts in 20 minutes. Ethan glanced through the ballroom again. Claire stood near the piano speaking quietly with the elderly concert pianist from earlier. The old man laughed warmly at something she said before handing her a folded business card. Claire accepted it politely, but slid it into her coat pocket without looking at it. No excitement. No performance. "Reschedule Chicago," Ethan said suddenly. His assistant nearly dropped the tablet in her hands. "Excuse me. Move it to tomorrow." "Tomorrow is impossible." "Then make impossible expensive." His assistant stared at him like she no longer recognized the man signing her paychecks. Ethan ignored the look and walked across the ballroom before he could reconsider it. Claire noticed him approaching almost immediately. "Should billionaires really be wandering around hotel kitchens this often?" she asked softly. Ethan glanced at the piano behind her. "Should waitresses really know more about concert instruments than trained technicians?" Claire folded a linen napkin carefully before answering. "Depends who they used to be." The sentence lingered between them quietly. Ethan leaned lightly against the edge of the stage. "Who did you used to be?" Claire looked down at the folded napkin in her hands. "Someone with expensive dreams." "Music school." Claire nodded once. "Juilliard prep program when I was 16. Ethan blinked slowly. Even he knew how impossible that was. "That is elite level." "It was." "What happened?" Claire smiled faintly, but the expression carried exhaustion around the edges now. "My father got sick." Ethan stayed silent. Claire continued folding napkins mechanically while speaking. "He restored pianos in Brooklyn for 30 years. Tiny shop. Tiny apartment above it. We were never rich, but we had music in every room." Her fingers paused briefly. Then the hospital bills started. Ethan watched her carefully. She never sounded self-pitying. Just honest. "I tried balancing classes and work for a while," she continued quietly. "Morning rehearsals. Night shifts. For hours of sleep. That sounds brutal. That sounds like New York." Ethan almost smiled again. Claire finally looked up at him. "Eventually my father could not work anymore. My younger brother was still in high school. Somebody had to pay rent." Ethan glanced toward her worn gray coat, hanging near the hallway entrance. Suddenly, every frayed sleeve and untouched coffee cup made sense. "So you left?" Claire nodded. "The piano was the last thing we sold." Silence settled softly around them while workers cleaned tables nearby. Ethan could almost picture it now. A teenage girl giving away the thing she loved most just to keep the lights on. "Do you miss it?" he asked carefully. Claire laughed once under her breath. "Not bitter. Just tired." "You do not stop missing something that saved your life." The honesty in that sentence hit Ethan harder than he expected. Across the ballroom, Vanessa entered through the main doors wearing sunglasses and irritation like matching accessories. She spotted Ethan standing beside Claire and slowed immediately. Her posture changed. Sharper now. Controlled. Dangerous in the polished way wealthy people become when embarrassed publicly. Vanessa approached with perfect composure. "There you are," she said lightly while slipping one arm around Ethan's shoulder. Claire stepped back instinctively. Vanessa noticed. Of course she noticed. "I have been waiting downstairs for 20 minutes. Ethan gently removed Vanessa's hand from his shoulder without thinking. The movement lasted less than 2 seconds. It still changed everything. Claire saw it. Vanessa definitely saw it. A strange silence settled over the ballroom. Vanessa turned toward Claire with a smile too perfect to be kind. "You certainly seem to have made an impression." Claire remained calm. "I just fixed a piano." "Right." Vanessa tilted her head slightly. "That must be exhausting." Ethan's expression hardened immediately. "Vanessa." "What?" she asked innocently. "I am complimenting her." Claire folded the final napkin carefully and placed it onto the table stack. "It is okay." Vanessa studied Claire up and down slowly. Designer eyes evaluating someone she considered beneath her world. "You know," Vanessa said softly, "there is something almost refreshing about women who still believe hard work is noble." Ethan stared at her. What is that supposed to mean? Vanessa gave a tiny shrug. Nothing. I just think people romanticize struggle when they do not have options. Claire reached for her tray calmly. Sometimes people with options are the most trapped. Vanessa's smile faded for the first time all morning. Ethan looked at Claire then. Really looked at her. Because somehow the woman carrying dirty glasses through hotel hallways had just said something truer than anything he had heard in years. The ballroom slowly emptied after Vanessa's comment, but the tension remained suspended in the air like smoke nobody acknowledged. Claire lifted the tray against her hip and walked calmly toward the kitchen corridor without waiting for another word. Ethan watched her disappear through the swinging doors while Vanessa stood beside him in sharp silence. You are embarrassing me, Vanessa finally said quietly. Ethan kept his eyes on the hallway. That seems to be a recurring concern for you lately. Vanessa crossed her arms. Do not do that. Do what? Pretend this is about philosophy or authenticity or whatever version of yourself you are experimenting with this week. Ethan turned toward her slowly now. You think this is a performance? Vanessa laughed softly, but there was no warmth left in it anymore. I think men like you get bored. Ethan said nothing. Vanessa stepped closer. You spend years surrounded by women who understand your world. Then suddenly you meet someone quiet and unavailable and convince yourself she is profound. Ethan looked toward the ballroom windows where rain clouds still darkened Manhattan even in daylight. Maybe she is. Vanessa stared at him for several seconds before shaking her head slightly. You do not even know her. I know she has not lied to me once. That landed harder than shouting ever could have. Vanessa's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Careful, Ethan. About what? Confusing humility with superiority. Ethan exhaled slowly. You really cannot stand that she does not care who we are, can you? Vanessa looked away first. Tiny movement. Tiny crack. Everybody cares, she answered quietly. Some people are just better at pretending they do not. Before Ethan could respond, a young hotel employee rushed through the ballroom carrying several garment bags and accidentally collided with Vanessa's arm. One of her coffee cups splashed across the floor near her shoes. Silence. The young employee froze immediately. I am so sorry, ma'am. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly like she was trying not to explode in public. Can anybody in this hotel do their job correctly? The employee's face turned pale. I said I was sorry. Ethan watched the entire exchange carefully. Then another voice interrupted softly behind them. It was an accident. Claire stepped out from the kitchen, carrying clean glassware stacked carefully on a tray. Vanessa turned toward her instantly. Of course you would defend incompetence. Claire crouched quietly and began wiping the spilled coffee from the marble floor before anyone slipped. I am defending exhaustion, she answered calmly. There is a difference. The young employee looked seconds away from tears. Vanessa laughed once beneath her breath. You really enjoy acting morally superior, do you not? Claire looked up slowly from the floor. No, she folded the damp towel once before standing. I just know what it feels like when one bad moment makes someone feel small. Silence spread outward between all three of them. Ethan felt it immediately. The honesty, the weight behind those words. Vanessa noticed it too. That was the worst part. Claire never fought for attention. Yet somehow every room bent toward her anyway. Vanessa straightened her coat carefully. You know what your problem is? She asked Claire quietly. Claire waited. Women like you make struggling look poetic. Like suffering automatically means depth. Claire held her gaze without flinching. No. Suffering just teaches you which things are real. Ethan watched Vanessa's expression shift then. Something colder now. More personal. And what exactly is real about serving drinks in a hotel ballroom? Vanessa asked softly. Ethan immediately stepped forward. Enough. But Claire answered first. Nothing. Vanessa blinked slightly. Claire continued calmly. There is nothing glamorous about being tired all the time. Her fingers tightened slightly around the tray. Nothing glamorous about choosing between Subway fare and groceries. Nothing glamorous about selling the piano your father spent 30 years restoring because the hospital keeps sending bills. The ballroom suddenly felt very quiet. Even nearby staff members stopped moving for a second. Claire looked down briefly before continuing softer this time. But some people survive hard things without becoming cruel afterward. Ethan felt that sentence somewhere deep beneath his ribs. Vanessa did too. Claire adjusted the tray against her shoulder again. Excuse me. I still have 6 hours left on my shift. Then she walked away through the ballroom carrying crystal glasses beneath the chandelier light, while nobody said another word. Ethan stared after her for several seconds before turning toward Vanessa slowly. "You owe her an apology." Vanessa looked stunned. "You cannot be serious." "I am." "For what?" "Telling the truth." Ethan shook his head once. "No. For becoming the kind of person who mistakes kindness for weakness." Vanessa stared at him like she no longer recognized the man standing in front of her. Maybe she did not, because Ethan barely recognized himself either. Somewhere between the gala and the service hallway and the sound of an old piano echoing through an empty ballroom, something inside him had started changing quietly. And for the first time in years, it felt honest. 3 months later, the first snow of December drifted quietly across Brooklyn like falling ash beneath streetlights. Small cafes glowed warm against the cold while strangers hurried past each other wrapped in scarves and unfinished conversations. On the corner of Dean Street, hidden between an old bookstore and a laundromat with flickering neon lights, a tiny piano lounge called Bellamy's prepared for its Friday night performance. The room only seated 40 people. No reporters. No chandeliers. No billion-dollar donors pretending to care about art. Just soft amber lighting, wooden floors, and the smell of coffee drifting through the air. Backstage, Claire Donovan sat alone beside an upright piano adjusting the sleeves of a simple black dress she almost never wore anymore. Her hands trembled slightly above the keys resting silently in her lap. Not fear exactly. Memory. The owner of the lounge peeked through the curtain with a nervous smile. "Packed house tonight." Claire laughed softly beneath her breath. 40 people is not exactly Carnegie Hall." "No," the owner admitted. "But 40 people came because they heard you play." Claire looked down quietly. 3 months earlier, she would have said no to this performance immediately. Too risky. Too painful. Too close to the version of herself she buried years ago beside unpaid hospital bills and subway exhaustion. But something had shifted since the gala. Not because a billionaire noticed her. Because for the first time in years, somebody looked at her like the dream still mattered. Out in the audience, snow tapped softly against the windows while guests removed gloves and winter coats. Near the back corner beside the brick wall sat Ethan Blackwell wearing a dark wool coat and no watch on his wrist for the first time anyone could remember. No security team followed him tonight. No assistant. No photographers waiting outside. He arrived alone 30 minutes early and quietly bought the cheapest ticket in the room. The waitress serving drinks had not recognized him. Ethan found that strangely comforting. A few weeks after the fundraiser, Vanessa left him publicly and dramatically enough for gossip magazines to celebrate it for days. Ethan barely responded, because somewhere between hotel hallways and midnight conversations beside old pianos, he realized he no longer wanted relationships built like business mergers. He wanted honesty now, even when it was uncomfortable. Especially then. The lights dimmed gently inside Bellamy's. Quiet conversations faded into silence. Claire stepped onto the tiny stage beneath warm amber light, carrying herself with the same calm dignity Ethan first noticed beneath the rain outside the Blackstone Imperial Hotel. No glamorous entrance. No dramatic introduction. Just quiet footsteps and honest, nerves hidden carefully behind steady breathing. Ethan watched her sit at the piano bench slowly. Her fingers rested above the keys for several seconds without moving. The room waited. Claire finally looked up toward the audience. Her eyes drifted briefly across the crowd before stopping near the back wall. Ethan met her gaze silently. No smile. No grand gesture. Just presence. Claire looked down again and pressed the first key softly. The music that followed felt less like performance and more like memory finally finding its way home. Gentle notes floated through the tiny lounge while snow continued falling outside the windows. Ethan sat completely still, listening to the woman everyone once overlooked fill an entire room without raising her voice once. Claire played for nearly 40 minutes. Some songs carried sorrow quietly beneath them. Others sounded lighter now, hopeful even. By the final piece, several people in the audience had tears in their eyes without fully understanding why. Because real emotion rarely announces itself loudly. Sometimes it simply sits beside you until your heart notices. The final note faded slowly into silence. Then applause rose through the room, warm and genuine and human. Claire stood carefully from the bench, looking almost overwhelmed by it. Ethan remained seated near the back for one extra second before joining the applause quietly. Claire noticed him immediately. After the performance ended and guests slowly filtered back into the snowy Brooklyn night, Ethan waited near the exit beside the coat rack. Claire approached, carrying sheet music beneath one arm, and a tired smile softer than anything he remembered from the hotel. "You came," she said quietly. Ethan nodded once. "I said I would." Snowflakes melted slowly against the dark fabric of his coat as cold air drifted through the opening door behind them. Claire studied him carefully. "No security? No assistant?" "No." Claire tilted her head slightly. "That seems dangerous for a billionaire." Ethan laughed softly. "Maybe I finally got tired of living like one every second of the day." Silence settled gently between them. Comfortable this time. Claire glanced toward the snow-covered street outside. "You know," she said softly, "most people spend their whole lives trying to be chosen." Ethan looked at her carefully. "And you?" Claire adjusted the sheet music against her chest. "I just wanted someone to see me before deciding what I was worth." Ethan felt something tighten quietly in his chest then. Not desire. Something deeper. Respect maybe. Gratitude. The beginning of becoming someone better. Outside, snow continued falling softly over Brooklyn, while warm piano music still echoed faintly through the little lounge behind them. And for the first time in years, Ethan Blackwell did not feel lonely standing in silence beside another human being.